You can see I've removed a bunch of parts from the engine and the engine compartment. These are things I can clean up and paint off the engine. The first is this fan shroud. Most of these fan shrouds get really ugly. The plastic gets faded, they get beat up and real dirty, so I'm going to take you through the process later on how we're going to clean up and make this fan shroud look like new. The other thing is I noticed when I removed the air filter housing that it looked kind of weird. I said, now just a minute here, I think somebody has cut that off, and you can see where someone has bent the metal back. And now I recall when I first got the car, the owner had installed a Raycor water separator filter on that side of the inner fender panel, and I think he cut this off because it was in the way of that filter. Well, I think that's kind of ugly, and it's not original either. But fortunately, I've got another air filter housing back there in my stock. Look at that. Isn't it nice to have used parts laying around? Because now we can clean this up. This is filthy. And we're going to clean it all up and paint it. And then we've got a couple other things, you know, the pulley, anything that I can get off the engine and spray paint it. It's going to be a lot easier than using a brush, like I'm going to show you a little bit later, where we're going to work in and around the engine. And then finally, we pull this coolant hose off because it's rusty, and I was concerned about the ends being rusty underneath the hose, and sure enough they were, and I'll show you a little bit later how we were able to get this off as well. So we've got all these parts. You know, here's the top of the air filter housing. Just wait until you see how nice this is going to look after we clean and paint it. Where I'm at right now is I've got the engine compartment completely cleaned up. That's the first thing I wanted to do, is get the engine compartment clean, and then we're going to go after the rust. So let me show you how I went through that cleaning process the other day. After thoroughly vacuuming this out, I got a hold of my trusty plastic razor blades and went in and started scraping all the excess. Then I got my chemicals and sprayer out. I have a method that I use. I've actually done a video on this. So if you're really interested in learning about the different types of brushes I use, the chemicals, the spray bottles, all the detail that goes into really cleaning an engine compartment like I'm doing here, be sure and check it out on my website. It covers a lot of unique features, including how I do this by using less than a gallon of water. So I'm actually able to clean this engine compartment in my shop with just a very small drip pan underneath the engine. I've decided to go ahead and remove this coolant pipe because it's corroded, and it's going to be easier to paint out of the car. Plus I want to check corrosion in the ends of the pipes where they go into the hoses. Also I want to check corrosion over here on the water pump housing. Now it's great you're going to get to see me use my favorite tool of the week live on this 240D. Have any of you ever tried to get these hoses off after they've been on for, 5, 10, 20, 30 years? Well, enter the clamping tool, the larger size clamping tool that we make here in the shop, and watch how easy it is to get these hoses loose from the pipes. I'm going to grab it just right on the pipe, and then I'm going to squeeze. You don't want to squeeze too hard, but then I'm going to twist it, and eventually you can break it loose. And then I'll just back it up here so it's away from the pipe. Now I'm going to lose coolant here. I've got a drip pan on the floor, and I can use this tool to also pull it off. I'll plug the hole here, and I'm going to aim it right down on the drip pan. Now, even though I've drained the radiator, look at how much coolant is in the block. This is the best way to drain the block after you've pulled that bottom radiator hose or remove the plug. Okay, I'm going to let this drain a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll remove this one and inspect that housing for corrosion. On this end, I'll just put the clamping tool right where the hose clamp goes, and I'm not going to squeeze too hard, just enough to grab the hose, and then I'm going to give it a good twist like that. Okay, there we go. And then I can back the clamping tool up and just work it right off. Look at that. It's probably a good thing that I'm removing this as a preventative measure, because I want to treat and stop this corrosion on this housing nipple before it really gets bad. I'm going to be using a rust neutralizer to treat all the rust spots before I top coat them with an enamel. I'm going to use a satin black, but I need to clean the excess rust off. I want to get the loose rust off. Now, anytime you're using a rust neutralizer like this, you don't want to remove all the rust. This actually likes to stick to rust, okay? And what it does is it converts it to a black coating in preparation for a top coat. It saves a lot of time. I mean, you know, somebody's gonna say, Kent, why don't you take the engine out of the car and sandblast it and paint it right? I don't wanna spend that much time, but I do want the paint to stick. And if you just paint right over the rust without neutralizing it, you know, it's probably gonna peel off in a year or two. So that's the goal. And I'm gonna use Scotch-Brite pads to clean off the loose rust on all the rust spots. What I've done is I've taken a large pad of this purple Scotch-Brite pad and I've cut it into various sizes that I can work in and around some tight spots. And I'll start out right here just on top the brake booster, and all I'm going to do is rub it until I get all the loose scale and rust off. I'm not going to rub it down to bare metal. Once again, these type of conversion products work best when they are able to stick to some rust, and you don't want to paint the areas that aren't rusty with this. So you're going to have to get some small brushes, maybe some small acid brushes. Now I'm going to go ahead and go about cleaning all these rust spots up, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to apply this product. For most of the areas I'm cleaning, it doesn't take much. You can see that just rubbing the Scotch-Brite pad just for a few seconds to loosen up that rust really gets it off. So this will go fairly quickly, and then we'll get ready to apply the neutralizer. The product I'm using today is Loctite Extend. I've used this over the years and I've had very good success with it. It's something that most of you viewers can find easily. You can actually buy this at Lowe's or some other hardware stores. The problem is it comes in a spray can. That's what's readily available on the market. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to be getting this on paint. It doesn't work in this application in a sprayable form. So what I do is I have these nice little 2-ounce containers. Now I have a whole bunch of these around the shop, and these are so handy for detailing. In fact, it was hard to find this particular container with a flexible plastic and a good tight lid. I buy these by the hundreds now, and I can offer these to you, the viewers. I have a kit now that includes a number of these and some brushes that you can use when you do this type of detailing. So what I'm going to do is actually spray a small amount into this container. I'm going to get this down real close and kind of spray at an angle, and it's just going to be a light little squeeze. I'll try to spray it so it's not getting a lot in the air. Now, I don't think this stuff's real good to breathe. I'm doing this here in the shop, and I'm going to stop and go outside, and that's what I recommend you would do. And we'll fill this up to about 1/2 inch and then come back in and start applying it to those rust spots on the engine. 2 coats are going to be required to get good adhesion. So you don't need to put it on real thick. Using an acid brush, I'm just going to coat the rusty area like this. I think you get the idea what I'm doing here. Otherwise, you don't need to sit and watch me apply this to every rust spot on the engine. But it'll be interesting. I'll let this dry, and when we come back, you're going to see it start to change color already just with the first coat. It applies nicely with an acid brush because you're just getting a thin coat on. I'm not going to worry about getting it on the valve cover gasket here because we're going to pull the valve cover pretty soon and adjust those valves and clean the cover up too. Okay, I'll keep working here and then I'll come back and show you what this looks like when we start to apply the second coat. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes since that first coat. That's about the maximum time you want to wait before you apply the second coat. You can see some of these areas are already turning dark and they're not totally black yet. But we're going to apply the second coat. I'm going to be a little careful not to get too much on. One of the tricks you can use if you're using an acid brush is dip it in to the extend and then take the excess and dab on a paper towel. And then when you apply it, it's not going to run down the side of the engine or the surface that you're working on. So I'll just take a little time here and apply this second coat to all these areas. And then tomorrow, we'll let it dry almost 24 hours, and then we'll come back and you're going to see quite a difference. And also, I put a little bit of water on one end of the rag here. If you get a little bit of excess on the painted areas, just come in and wipe this off a little bit. You don't need the excess on the painted areas, and that really helps to keep it from building up, because if you put it on too thick and it's on the painted area, it'll be tacky and sticky the next day. It's been 2 days since I applied the rust conversion coating on the engine parts. You're going to get a chance to look at that. You know, you don't want to be in a hurry when you do this. You really want to make sure that Extend product dries thoroughly. If you top coat it with an enamel before it's dry, you're going to have some problems down the road. So let's take a look. You can see right here along the top of the engine block where the injectors are. Look at how that's all turned black. And over there on that area by where the fuel filter mounts, look, that was really rusty. Now you might say, well, Kent, you can just leave that like that. That's probably good enough for me. Well, it probably is, but unless you top coat that, it's going to start corroding, particularly if it gets some water on it, and the water sits and gets into the steel. So we're gonna go ahead and get ready to paint here. Now, when you're talking about painting an engine with a brush, it can be challenging. Number one, you've got to have the right brushes. And number two, you've got to have the right paint. Not all paint is created equal. And I'm going to show you this here. This is all satin black. Can you believe that? All satin black. Now you can see that all satin black is not created equal. I don't want to shine, but I also don't want flat. There's some of these here that are really flat, and there's some that claim to be semi-gloss that are just too shiny. So you want to get the right dullness to the paint, or otherwise it doesn't look right. You also want to get a paint that will flow out good. And then, of course, you want to get brushes, good brushes, not cheap brushes. Now, I modify some brushes. I take this 1 inch and cut it down to about 3/4 of an inch. I like these brushes that have the angle with the straight point. And you're going to also need some smaller brushes. Now, we'll get into this in the next episode and show you some details of painting this, but I want you to just take a look at the brake booster. I went after that brake booster with this wedge-shaped brush, and I'm using my favorite. It's the Rust-Oleum Professional Semi-Gloss Black. What I like about that is it keeps flowing out even a day after you've applied it. It's fairly thick, so it doesn't want to run, and it goes on as smooth as any other paint I've used. You can see here right on the top of this oil cooler, I painted that 2 days ago, and look at how it's flowed out. Now, I didn't even sand it, so I wanted to give it some of that original patina, so I left some roughness underneath, but it has the right color consistency, and it flows good. Those are the two keys.